Good afternoon, everyone. I think we're about to start now. Thank you very, very much for waiting. Apologize for the delay. And welcome to this session on a new narrative for global road safety. My name is Matthew Taylor, communications here for WHO. Road safety, as we know, has rarely, if ever, received the attention and the demand for action that it deserves. Yet we know that storytelling can drive demand for change. So how can we disrupt the tacit acceptance of road deaths? How can we share the inclusive vision of safe and sustainable mobility? And how can we boost demand for public solutions, proven solutions? So we're absolutely honored and delighted to have the UN Secretary General's Special Envoy on Road Safety here with us to open the session. So Mr. Todd, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, everybody, and again, I'd like to thank the government of Morocco, under the patronage of His Majesty the Queen, Mohammed VI, and all the government, and of course, the strong input of, does it work or not? The strong input of Nazar, the input of the Minister of Transport, Abdessamad Kayou, and it has given also the opportunity, together with all the team of WHO. I see Nan here, and thank you, Nan, for having done such a great job for making this meeting possible. Motorbike in Morocco, you will have 2 helmets together with the motorbike. And it seems something unbelievable, but in fact it should have been done much earlier. When you buy a car now, you have 4 safety belts. You know, 50 years ago, it was not existing. So simply, you have to be creative. You need to have people who have the energy of doing something. We are... Thank you. We are in the African continent, most vulnerable. I just was with a Guinean delegation. 13 million population, 4,500 people die every year. It means statistics 37 for 100,000 population. Can you imagine the carnage? So we need to stop the carnage. All in this room, we know about it, but the most important is how we are going individually to be able to act in order to stop it. And I do count on you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John Todd, UN Special Envoy, UN Secretary General's Special Envoy for Road Safety. We need to stop the carnage. It doesn't get much simpler than that. So let's welcome our panelists to see how we can tell effective stories to help do that. In no particular order, of course. May I invite up to the table there, Dr. Nan Tran, Head of Safety Mobility for WHO. Mr. Abdessamad Mafa, who is from our gracious hosts, the National Moroccan Road Safety Agency, where he is Director of Communications. Thank you. Dorcas Wanjira, BBC Africa's health correspondent. Thank you very much for being here. Deepak Dash, who is Senior Assistant Editor for the Times of India in New Delhi. Thank you, sir, for being here. Armandine Morheim, who is Editor-in-Chief for sports documentaries for Canal+. Thank you for being here, Armandine. And Claire Martinet, who is Director of Sustainable Development with the Renault Group, as you've just heard from Mr. Todd. Thank you for that. And of course, Albert Azaraf, Chief of Communications for JC Decaux, and I'm sure we'll have some wonderful insights on visual storytelling. So welcome to our panelists, and thank you very much for being here. I'm conscious of time, so let's let them sit down, and then I'll jump right into it. So, if it's okay, I'll start, seeing as you're in the end here, Nan, I'll start with Dr. Nan Tran from WHO. As we've just heard from the Special Envoy, we've had some interesting decisions over the last 36 hours or so, and a wonderful session on the future of road safety yesterday morning. Now, if we're going to tell better stories about road safety, we need to have a clear narrative, and based on the discussions here today, Dr. Tran, and your knowledge as WHO's lead on this area, can you help set the tone for us and give a bit of an overview of how a narrative for road safety needs to evolve? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks for the privilege of being on this distinguished panel with all of these experts. I think for me there's a couple of points. I started work in road safety 20 years ago, and when I first started in this field, I think the narrative was very different. It was very much on getting people to behave better. And then from that point, we started to talk about safe systems and thinking about the fact that people's behaviors are a function of the systems and that we really need to strengthen and support the systems to improve the road safety outcomes that we're interested in. I think where we are now is even one step further. And I think we're no longer just talking about how do we improve or prevent road traffic deaths. I think the question that we're starting to ask ourselves now is how do we prevent the deaths today, stop the deaths of today, but also prevent the deaths of tomorrow? And I think that's a slightly different question because it's no longer just asking us what do we need to do to get people to behave better. It's actually thinking about how do we think about the future of transport and what do we need to put in place now to ensure that the future of transport is safer, is more equitable, and is more sustainable. And I think for that reason, over the last day and a half or 2.5 days, we've heard a lot of calls for greater integration of road safety into the broader development agenda and into the broader discussions around sustainable transport. Because I think there is recognition now that how we design the transport systems actually has a direct impact on the road safety outcomes that we're so concerned about, the carnage that Jean is talking about. Earlier this morning, we had a great panel discussion, including the mayor of Paris, the vice mayor of Guayaquil, and the transport commissioner from New York City. And again, they were starting to talk about things like how do we design our cities in ways that actually allow for more accessible transport? How do we put in systems that actually allow people to choose from a variety of modes that give them more options to be safe, right? So I think those are the types of where we are moving as a field, and that's very different than where we started at 20 years ago. And so again, I think part of the shift in the narrative that we have to be driving towards is to be starting to think about, yes, there are problems today. There is an urgency, obviously, in terms of the number of deaths. But we also have to think about solving and preventing and anticipating the problems of tomorrow. And so that, I think, is where the challenge lies, is how do we respond now, but also be proactive so that tomorrow, the future of transport, we don't have the same problems again. So I think that's really the heart of what we're trying to do here.
You get a round of applause, that's all right. Thank you very much, Dr. Tran, for setting the stage there and thinking bigger, transport systems for people, not cars and so on. So, if I can move on to Dorcas Wanjira, BBC Africa's health correspondent. Thank you very much for joining us here. Very simple question to start with, if that's all right, and that is, how interested are your audiences and your editors in stories that touch on road safety? Thank you.
Well, so that's a very important question, Matt. Good evening. Bonsoir tout le monde. So are our editors interested and are our audiences interested in these kinds of stories? Definitely yes, because road safety is a priority for everyone. Everyone knows someone who has been involved in a road crash or incident, and this is something that is relatable. So stories matter when they're relatable, and usually at the BBC, what we do look at is what does the audience need? It's not about what I want to say. It's about what the audience needs, and that's what storytelling is about. And our audiences have 4 main needs. There's update me, what's new? Everyone is keen on what happened. And then we have the inspire me, and this is what works very well. Who inspires you? Who is somebody who, when you see, I've seen a photo of Verstappen, well, I like Hamilton anyway, but who inspires you? And then our audiences have needs for educate me, inform me. So what we are trying to do when it comes to road safety is to meet our audience needs. And sometimes the stories that work very, very well are those stories that also entertain. It was Walt Disney who I believe said, it's easier to educate when you entertain than to educate and then entertain. So stories also have to be entertaining. We're living in a world where a lot of young people are on their phones. So can you tell a story that can also entertain them, hook, and hold them?
Thank you very much. There's a round of applause coming. There you go. It looks like everyone's going to get one, and why not? Thank you very much. That was really clear and really, really helpful. So I'm going to, we've got a panel here that's not organized in any particular way. So I'm going to jump to another journalist, senior assistant editor, in actual fact, from Times of India, Deepak Dash. Is that similar, how do your audiences in your editors in India working for Times of India respond and to road safety stories, and how interested are they in them?
Yeah. I think good evening to all of you. The issue differs from country to country. Like in Europe, the problem is different than countries like us, India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, and Sri Lanka. And those have high numbers of deaths, particularly if you look at even Mexico, countries of our size. What you asked is very right. Convincing editors is the first most difficult job of a journalist. If you are my boss, if you are interested, then only it gets published or gets televised. Until you are interested, the story ends with the reporter itself. So there is the problem. Problem is first you need to convince your own people. There is a little bit of difficulty in understanding. Let's become very frank. I think we are at a very difficult stage, very critical stage. Many things we expected across the globe, but much has not happened. So let's accept the truth that most of the editors, most of the journalists, most of the politicians, bureaucrats are political animals. They are more interested in politics. So a person who is whole the day dealing with political persons, bureaucrats, if you tell him about road safety story, it takes time to sip in. But as a journalist, we need to do it every day. If you push it, like I come from a country, India, almost 10% of global death, burden of death on road, that happens in our country. So there, the storytelling cannot be the way you can do it in Africa or in France or in Germany or in another developed country, because you have almost every day 470 people dying every day. So if I wait for writing a very good narrative of emotional story, it will be too late, because I cannot write every day all those 100 stories. I strongly feel that now what we need to do is countries that have high number of deaths, we need to focus on data which is very specific, telling. If I write a story simply saying so many people died, it may not be of interest to me, not to my editor, even my wife will not read it. So forget about even with my own name, my daughter is not reading. That's the problem with our profession now. So what to do? I think the time has come. We need to write stories that are much more telling. When we write about numbers, numbers should speak in a way that touches everyone's life. I know I can take just one more second, sir. There is a saying in our profession, proximity is news. If I tell you what's happening in India, all the panelists will not be interested, but I'll be interested because I am directly linked to it. If I write what happens in Morocco, maybe you will be interested to read it. So a journalist must know how to write it in a manner that touches people's life. I can give an example like yesterday, the UN envoy, Secretary General envoy made a very interesting point that every day almost we are losing, in a year, almost we are losing entire population of Marrakesh. Now that's the way we need to write it. If we write, it will touch people's life. I think there is a difficulty, but as a journalist, our job is to fight against the or go against the wind. They're just saying only the dead fish, flows with the water, but the live one goes against the water. So let's go against the water. Thanks a lot.
I want to stick with the two journalists on the panel for just one more question, because we have some really wonderful insights from all the group here, but I just want to stick with Deepak and Dorcas for one question. So Dorcas, really simple question before we move on to the rest of the panel who have wonderful insights to share. Simple, what makes a good road safety story? That is it.
So, well, I started out in Kenya working for local media, and there's something that people used to call an accident reporter. And to be honest, this wasn't a compliment, it was actually an insult, because it meant you're the kind of reporter every day was just reporting about accidents, telling us how many people died, and it ended there. But then again, as I grew, I began to realize, like you said, it's not just about the deaths and the dying, it's about the solutions and what we can do. In essence, story is about what changes and why that matters. So what makes a good story? At the heart of it are always people, and that's what stands out for me. Roads are designed for metal and not people. So we need to have characters who are very strong, good data, good science, and also good follow-up. And a good story will have impact ultimately. So you have to look at a story that people can relate to, but also language matters. Instead of saying accident, saying a crash or an incident, that's very, very important. And I think good storytelling cuts across, whether it's journalism, whether it's a film, whether it's a movie. But even as a journalist, you must be interested, you must be aware, you must be conscious of what your audience needs, and also following the science, and that is very, very important.
Any applause for that? Okay. So, a virtual applause. So let's move on. Thank you very much for those wonderful tone-setting beginnings. So Amandine Morheim, thank you so much for joining us, and you are obviously a leading sports documentary filmmaker, or editor for Canal Plus in that area. Based on your experience of producing many, many documentary films over the years, it's a similar broad question, which is, how can we inspire people? How can we get them to care more about road safety? Thank you very much.
Bonjour. Follow Mr. Todd for a documentary 2 years ago called Jean Todt La Méthode, and I follow him in Ghana, for example, in New York City also, and all around the world. And I saw that, as you said, that every people has different needed. So we absolutely have to adapt to them, and to the guy in the center in Paris, and also the guy in the little boy in the countryside in Africa. And as a communicant people, we have to adapt to them, because everybody needs different things. What we can make in documentaries and tell in documentaries, we have more time to analyze and to let people understand the real life of athletes, because I specifically talk about sports, and so they are all athletes, and we can also understand what they live, and we will soon broadcast a documentary about wheelchair tennis woman, and she tells a story, she tells all the story and how she lived it, and I think that it's very important to show all of this, because it's not just say, okay, put a helmet, it's also what is the consequences. And in big documentaries we have more time to tell this. In another part, I think that we have to adapt to the reality today. For example, a lot of young people like little format, like TikTok or something like that, and we also have to adapt and put messages in different way. But we have to adapt to the situation right now.
Very much. So I'm going to go to Cleo Bartomeu, Vice President of Sustainability at Renault. Thank you very, very much. A different perspective and an interesting perspective and a crucial perspective from business. So as, and I know that you have a strong background in communications as well, so as a major vehicle manufacturer globally, in your messaging, how do you tie the sustainability agenda with the safety agenda?
Yeah, so it's quite a tricky one because when we do sustainability as a car manufacturer, the main expectation is climate, right? We are all expected to deliver efficient, low-carbon vehicles, and safety is kind of a given. You know, people are expecting us to deliver safe vehicles, and it's not really a story they're expecting us on. You know, they're like, okay, it's your job, so there's nothing really differentiating here. Plus, from an operational point of view, sustainability, meaning environment, and safety are completely different programs within the company. You have people dealing with the decarbonization of the supply chain and the electrification on the one hand, and on the other hand, the tech and engineering team dealing with the safety, to put it in very bold brushstrokes. And so the way we make each world collide and speak is, and I'm joining my fellow colleague on the panel, is through the education and the edutainment. We developed within our vehicles a safety score and an eco score, which are both measuring how the driver and its passengers can contribute to a more efficient, low-carbon driving and also a safer one. And so when you drive more safely, you use less emergency braking, you have less speed, and all of this contributes to consuming less energy and polluting less. And so by having a more safer driving, you have a more low-carbon driving too. And that's the way we frame both of them together very pragmatically in our vehicles through a score that we educate and entertain our drivers with.
Safety breeds sustainability and a positive cycle of safe and sustainability. Wonderful, wonderful. So let's move on to Mr. Albert Asseraf, who is, of course, as you've heard, Vice President of Communications for JC Decaux, which is a leading global outdoor advertising company. Correct me if I'm wrong, sir, but I believe you're present in 80 countries, and I'm sure that many people will have seen your billboards outside here or at the airport when they landed. So, given that, could you, given that the theme right now is how do we tell good stories, can you just give us a few key pointers and examples, if possible, on what are the key ingredients of good visual storytelling? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Matt. It's not an easy question because the starting point is not exactly the same from a brand to another. Let's take an example. I have on my left-hand side Renault, and I have Canal+. I'm sure that they are very known, but you don't have the same, maybe, perception, vision of this company. JC Decaux is in 80 countries. We are not in Morocco at all. It means that the awareness of a company is very low in this country. So when you decide to work on an outdoor campaign, you need to understand the level of perception, awareness, loyalty of the brand to be sure that audiences will understand your message. You have on my right one of the 16 visuals of our Road Safety Worldwide campaign with Michel Yeo. Michel Yeo is known everywhere in the world, so it helps to make understand the campaign. In some countries, some ambassadors are known only in one single or two countries, so we need to adapt that. And if we are back to outdoor, I think that one of the main rules to respect is to be very simple and clear. You have between 2 and 3 seconds maximum to see an outdoor campaign. You cannot write a story on the poster. So being clear and specific, being very impactful, and only one message on a poster, not 2, not 3 messages, one message that you need to repeat again and again from a campaign to another.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you very much. Clear, concise, one message, striking imagery. So, Mr. Martha, Communications Director here at NASA. This is where we tie some of these lofty ideas to reality, right? So, as the comms director for NASA, can you just give the audience an idea of what sort of things are you telling the public every day? What are you talking about on a day-to-day basis from NASA's social media and other accounts?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Math, for your wonderful, moderating of such an important issue. Before answering, maybe I am obliged to express my gratitude to all our distinguished guests here in Morocco. You are welcome in the Kingdom of Morocco, and we hope that the outcome from Marrakesh Declaration will be the fruits of these discussions. As far as your question is concerned, in NASA as an establishment, we have been created just in 2020. We are very young establishments, but behind us we have 42 or 43 years of experience dealing with sensitization, with education, and also with, all approaches of communication. I have heard a lot of interesting, concepts concerning the impact, concerning the data, concerning using a scientific approach to deal with this matter. So in NASA, we have a pool, a department, a big department. So it is divided into, let's say, very, simple, let's say, structures. We have education, we have communication, RP, and also dealing with digital, dealing with broadcasting, TV, radio, posters, etc. But also we have a department of education for children and for youth. So our approach, I can tell you, that in our pool we have all specialists, doctors from psychology, sociology, communication, marketing, etc. And our main objective is dealing with such a hard issue, how we can communicate, with which manner, which kind of approach, which kind of concepts. And I can tell you that we have used it in a very scientific way. There is a dramatization. We have to be hard and harsh with the audience, but at the same time, since it is cyclic, sometimes we should be, we should use some pedagogy in it, some education in it. And if you have seen the film of the opening session, indeed, in the conception, we have had this discussion also. Which kind of film should we put in this opening session? And the discussion was whether it should be institutional or the emotional. And we have adopted the emotional one. Very few words, accurate messages, big images, big sequences, because we have to impact the brain and the mind. And this is the hard issue of all establishments dealing with communication. I can tell you that I come from journalism field. I used to be a journalist first, before entering such a huge institution, which is NASA, and I know beforehand what are the needs of journalists, which kind of materials we should give to you as an information, as an institution, official institution. But at the same time, we are compelled, to product a lot of, TV broadcasting, radio, poster, etc. So we cannot say that there is one approach. It is multi-sectorial approach, and each theme or each thematic issue needs a very, a clear-cut thinking about which kind of audience we are targeting. So we cannot say that we have a recipe and it is done. I have just this message which can go to all audiences. We have to be selective. We should work in a scientific approach, with a scientific approach, and all messages are not the same. Messages for children are not messages of young people. they are not the same for, elders. That's why we work as a team inside NASA, but in collaboration with some professional agencies in terms of strategic and the tactics in terms of marketing. So this is our hard issue, a daily issue, looking for innovation, looking for messages, looking for good ideas. And during the whole year, we found ourselves with 20 or more, 40 campaigns, and we are very, very delighted that we have joined. The campaign of Mr. John Todd with celebrities, and I think we have adopted because messages are universal, and using celebrities as spokeswomen of this message, and we have a lot of celebrities which can give messages and be more impactful. That's why I say that communication issue is not a scientific one. 1 + 1 is not maybe 2, but maybe 3. That's why we have to think twice and thrice to have a good message and the right tactic and the right communication plan.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Maafa. But on a day-to-day basis, you're talking about things like roadworks, new seatbelt laws, things like that, right? This is the day-to-day stuff that NASA is talking about. Is that right, or have I misunderstood that? On your X feed, for example, or your Facebook page, this is what you're talking about.
Yeah, I say that NASA, it is a public establishment. We are compelled to adopt a scientific approach in terms of communication plan. And our communication plan is issued from a strategic. So we have the strategic objectives, but our objectives in terms of communication, they are not, maybe do not go hand in hand with the strategic objectives. In terms of communication, our aim objective is how clear our messages are, to what extent the audience can understand and can adopt this message. And also, we work hard to evaluate our campaigns, and we know beforehand that we cannot succeed at each time. We can adopt a very good message with good images, but the impact is not the same. That's why I'm saying that communication needs to borrow marketing strategies, to borrow communication strategies, to borrow scientific concepts, and communication is the overall, but it goes hand in hand with enforcement, with infrastructure, and with all strategic axes.
No, that's wonderful. Thank you. Really important point at the end there, and really, really insightful overview, Mr. Maafa. Thanks for that. So, look, I think we've covered some fundamentals of storytelling and strategic communications, right? So maybe we can dig a little deeper, also looking at the clock. And I have a very specific question, topical question from other countries. This is open to the panel, but I'll start with Dr. Tran because you're here. So we know that in many countries, road safety is becoming politicized. Speed limits, car-free neighborhoods, these sort of things are being wrapped up into culture wars and a backlash against net zero and climate change. If we're talking about future-orientated, safe and sustainable mobility, how can we bring people together and not feed into that divisive narrative?
That is not a small question.
Sorry, I had to put it in.
So let me perhaps start, and I'm sure my colleagues on the panel will probably provide additional insights. But let me perhaps steal an insight from what Anne Hidalgo said this morning in her panel. And that is that, and I think this is part of what the challenge of communication around road safety is, that what we communicate to people isn't always what they want, what they think they want. The example that Anne gave this morning, Ms. Hidalgo gave this morning, was about the school, exactly to your point, the roads in front of the schools. And she had said that one of the things that they had done in Paris was to block off the roads in front of schools, and they called them the streets for schools. And of course, that was done with the intent of road safety, because there was concern there. But that was not the message that they gave to the parents, right? And eventually, they expanded those roads and they said, oh, do you want to have trees there? Yes, we want to have trees there because they're nice and so forth. But the point that I'm making here is that one of the challenges that we have is that we have to be able to separate what we want and the message that we give to the public in order for them to accept that. And it's not always the same thing, right? And in some ways, it's what you're saying, Mafa, it's being perhaps manipulative or maybe slightly deceptive, but it is in a way of thinking about what is the goal that we want, and how do we communicate to the public for them to accept that? And maybe, Clea, to your point, it's not always about saying, yes, you should drive slower because it's safe. It's saying, yes, you should drive slower because you will save money on petrol, right? Maybe that's the message that resonates with the public. And I think that's part of why we struggle as a field, because I don't think that often we're thinking about how do we position ourselves and our topics to get the outcomes that we want. And so much of the communications that we've seen have been about, yes, road safety is important, and let's do something about it. And in some ways, it is counterintuitive to say, road safety is so important that we should not talk about it, but say, drive slower because you use less gas. So I think that's the challenge that we're dealing with, and I think it's being creative. The other thing that I just wanted to speak upon is that I also think that there is a point where we have gotten so entrenched in this need to justify ourselves, and there's this need to say we have to have an economic argument because we have to talk to ministers of finance who will approve these budgets. And the question I have is, if there is no economic argument for road safety, do we not do it? And I think that's part of our challenge, is that, you know, if you make road safety a priority, it becomes one thing on a list of many things to do. And if there's a crisis, then road safety gets knocked off. I think we have to stop talking about road safety as a priority. We have to start thinking about road safety as a core value, right? Values are core parts of what we do. They're core of what we are as a society. And even if there is no return on investment for road safety, we do it because it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing for the communities, and it's the right thing for people. So I think, yes, we have to be creative. We have to think about how do we talk about what it is we want. And it's not always the same as what people think they want. And two, I think we have to be, as Deepak, you're saying, let's go against the grain. Let's be the live fish that are willing to say, it doesn't matter if there is an economic cost. I know WHO puts out those numbers. We say every year it's 3 to 5% of GDP. We say that road safety interventions are very cost effective, and there's a value to that. But I am here to say that even if there are not any economic benefits, that we still should do it because we think it's the right thing to do, right? We don't say, don't kill people, don't murder people because there's an economic loss to society. We do it because we think it's not right. And if you start to think about road traffic crashes as violence, then I think we start to look at it from that perspective and to say, we need to do that because it's right.
Well, there you go. Does anyone else on the panel want to add to that or chime in there? Or yes, please do, Amandine.
Maybe what I can add is to don't hesitate to shock people, because we need to be shocked by something to be conscious that something is real. If we are not shocked, it's something far and something not in the life or not in our life. But people on the packet of cigarettes now, there is very bad pictures, and it's very shocking, but it's the reality. So I think we can't show everything, but we have to show something very shocking to help people to be conscious of the reality.
Much, and just to go back, oh, sorry, Mark.
Yeah, but not all the time. I mean, in terms of concepts, we cannot adopt such approach time. That's why we can banalize, I mean, the message itself. Shocking is, in terms of the impact, it should have the impacts once, twice, thrice, but not all the time. That's why I have said that communication is not science, pure science. And we have to adopt communication plan, communication campaigns, dealing with, I mean, the issue itself. and it should be studied beforehand, because the audience are not the same, messages are not the same, and the impacts cannot be the same. That's why we have, this is the challenge that we have in our institution, NARSA. We are all the time discussing whether we have adopted a good approach or not, and whether we should innovate. And the innovation is our huge challenge. Which kind of message, which kind of ideas that we need. That's why, as I have said, the last campaign that we had the privilege to join, John Todd's campaign concerning celebrities is good, because having this in Morocco, 16 celebrities, and we have added the Moroccan one. This, I think, we can say that this is another approach, another milestone, but it is not, a unique approach, a unique concept. Yeah.
Anyone else? No? I want to put a question to the panel that sort of comes up from what Naam was saying about a moral and ethical imperative and a value-based requirement for road safety, and that is some academics in different places have been talking about changing the name of road safety and calling it road danger, to put the emphasis on the fact that it is dangerous and the fact that, individual safety solutions without these systemic changes that we've been hearing about don't do the job enough. So essentially I'm talking about rebranding road safety. Does anyone have any, looks like Deepak might have something to say.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. If you, go back to 10 years, we used to talk about road accident, now we say road crash. That impact has started happening. I can give an example. I remember there was a story, online story in India. People in our country, even here and other developing countries, people don't wear helmet. They have a helmet because there is a law. The driver must have a helmet, but they hold it on their hand. So one website wrote, "Does our hand need a helmet?" Yeah. That had impact. I can tell you when I go to drop my daughter to the school, if she finds someone holding a helmet in his hand, she will say, "Oh, it seems his hand needs a helmet." So sometimes it may work. I think it's not a bad idea, because as rightly my friend said that we need to innovate. If the old thing is not working, if you are whole night you are a good mathematician making 1 and 1, 1 plus 1, next day morning it is becoming 1. So that means either you don't know how to do mathematics or you need to change it. So if the road safety, the same talk has not done the expected thing, I think trying something new is nothing wrong with it. That's my view.
Oh, thank you, sir. Anyone else?
Well, I think it's quite an interesting question. There's no yes or no answer. But for instance, at the BBC, we have 42 language services. So sometimes when you have a story, you have to convince 42 editors, whether it's Swahili or Arabic or Punjabi, Hindi, to see which stories people will want. I'll give an example of a story that did very well this last week. We had a story from Chile about the man who was swallowed by a whale, and then the whale spat him out. So many language services picked up that story because of the value that was common. There was that surprise, there was that element of what happens next. Did the whale swallow him like the story of Jonah in the Bible? What was he going through? So I think, but then what we believe and what I hear my editors tell me, our work is not to tell people what to think. It's about telling them what to think about, because we believe our audiences are smart, our audiences are intelligent. I'm not a stickler for shame or shock value so much, but I believe that you should trust your audience to know what they can feel or what they can interpret. In Kenya, there used to be a show known as Roadhog. So Roadhog was a very interesting show that people would send videos of drivers who are misbehaving on the road, not just drivers, but also pedestrians. And then towards the end, the presenter would say, "Shame on you." They used the shame factor. It worked for a while, but then after a whole year, there were so many cases of defamation. People stopped caring. People stopped feeling that shame. You asked about our values. I listen to young people and they say they've seen so many road crashes or accidents that sometimes they don't move them anymore. One day someone saw something and was like, this is not that bad. So I guess every day our audiences are evolving, the messages are changing, but we have to find that which remains constant. And lastly, I think about this like a menu, a buffet. If you eat the same thing every day, every day, every day, sometimes you'll get tired of it, and sometimes you'll want something new, but the hunger remains constant. So I guess, and also climate change is very political. In Kenya also, I speak about it because that's where I'm from. There was a time when the government introduced speed governors that would limit the speed. You would not go beyond 80 kilometers per hour, and it was so difficult to implement. But the Minister of Transport at the time was a very tough minister, and he ensured that everyone had the speed governors. So enforcement does matter, but it also, I feel as the world, we have very many shared values than we think. So, but it's still not like a 1 year context also does matter.
Thank you so much. Anyone else want to add to that?
Just-
I saw some more hands.
Just a few words.
Just a word. You have to always to be very careful when you change the name of a brand, because now road safety is a brand, and it means that we are collectively responsible for safety. If you change for road danger, it could be perceived as danger is the others. It's never you on the road, the one who is dangerous. So, as Jean-Paul Sartre said, hell is it's the others. And it's exactly the subject on the road. So when you change the name, you have to be careful of how people will understand the brand.
I'd clap as well if my hands weren't full. That was really great. Thanks. Claire, I think you had something to add as well, no, if I'm not mistaken?
I hope it won't come as a shock, but I believe narratives and brands can only go so far, and I can rejoin what my fellow panelists said about believing that the audience are smart and that they know what they're doing. I think a lot of road safety also has to do with people not always being in capacity to be in a safe position everywhere. Because they're not well equipped, because the infrastructure is not there, because the vehicles are not well equipped enough. So there is also a collective effort in making this transition to a safer road more accessible to everyone, and that's beyond the narrative. It also has to do with abandoning maybe some return on investments that you're mentioning, and some long-term vision. So. It's just to say that there's also this economic part that we should really be aware of beyond the branding and the narratives.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Really valuable.
I'm sorry. Concerning, change of branding, it's dangerous itself, because in terms of the concepts, the notion of risk is cultural and social, and you have talked about, Jean-Paul Sartre. I can even add Aristotle, the notion of catharsis, pity and fear. That's why road safety is a brand in itself. We cannot change it, because cultural attitudes and social attitudes are a very, very hard issue to, just take a decision like this and saying that we can't change it. Yeah.
Matt, can I actually, listening to this, I have a question for the panel. I know I'm not a moderator, but I'm stimulated by the conversation. And I guess it's for the journalists, but also to Claire and to Albert. Is there a difference between what your goal is as reporters, because you are reporting, versus what you're trying to do when you're doing a campaign? Because yes, audiences are smart and intelligent, but audiences are not always rational. I shouldn't say rational. What stimulates the change isn't always the same, right? We want people to drive safer, slower because we think it's safe, but sometimes it's the economies that you make on the fuel that is the reason why people do that. So as a reporter, you're trying to give people information so that they can process and take what we think would be rational actions. But in the campaigns, is that the same as what you do, or are you trying to think about, is it the emotion, the emotional reaction, or is it the economies, because we're now all dealing with whatever issues? And I wonder if that's different between reporting and marketing.
Well, there is
So much to
So
do.
for-
sorry.
sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, so for reporting, impartiality is key because, like I said, my job is not to tell the audience what to think, it's to tell them what to think about. But in essence, when you tell a story or a report, your work is to speak to the experts, to have multiple voices. I am not an expert, but you can speak to the victim, you can speak to the engineer, the government, who do we hold to account, and create something that works for everyone else. As a human being, ultimately, you expect the good story to do its work, but it's not my work to push maybe an agenda or a value that I may have or what I may want to see, because then you cross the thin line between journalism and activism. But we trust that stories are powerful on their own. I know this may not be the best example, but I remember where I was when it was announced that Princess Diana had died, and the immense grief that brought to the entire world. So, and people started thinking about this tunnel in Paris, which we have never seen. So who is responsible? The inquest that followed after. But the powerful stories helped to let the world know that this has happened. Then you set the stage for the politicians, the public, now to act on the story. We at the BBC, how do we monitor our impact? We look at how many people have read this story, how many people have watched this story, where are they watching it from? We do the follow-up. A story doesn't just end when it goes on air. What happens after? And it's our job to keep setting the agenda. The thermostat sets the temperature, the thermometer tells you what the temperature is. You try to be both. But we are not activists. We are just storytellers, and we set the agenda.
Thank you so much, Dorcas. This is a clear dividing line between roles, and it brings us on quite nicely, because Deepak, I know that yesterday you were on the... Oh, we've got another one? Sorry. Yeah.
I just wanted to circle back on the question. It's such a good question. We, as a car maker, and us as being head of sustainability, we try to promote safety as a very prominent differentiating feature. And then journalists, most of them, and no offense, are like, it doesn't interest me. Every car maker does safety. It's not sexy, it's not differentiating, there's nothing to write there. And the other enemy of storytelling is ourselves as a car maker, because most safety is driven by very tech guys. And the way they talk about safety is, oh, this car has 52 ADAS, so driving assistance aids. So that it looks wonderful, but nobody uses them because they don't know how to use them. It's such a complex and wide array of technologies embarked that it looks very refined, but how about its utility? So that's yet another topic. So it's a real challenge to make safety a marketing and communication topic, because it's not sexy, it provides people anxiety, and it's perceived as a given. So the way we've addressed it is write stories about it. We made a movie about our collaborations with firefighters. We made a campaign about edutainment and the score that we've put through. But it's a challenge. It's a challenge because that's not why people buy vehicles at the moment. Yeah.
I think it's a very difficult question you mentioned, Nan, because I'm going to tell you a story. A few weeks ago, I was following a group, a French group, because in France, when you lose points because of the way you drive, you need to recover your driving license. So there was 12 people in the room, and all 12 people considered that they don't understand why they were in this room. Because for one of them, frankly, driving 30 kilometers beyond the limit is not so difficult to control. For the other one, 3 drinks is not so much. So it means that you need to become guilty instead of proud when you do that kind of behaviors. So it's just a question of culture. It's a long work, but it's the only way to do things. People need to feel guilty when they behave like this. That's all.
Okay, so yeah, some people for shaming and guilt, and others more positive narrative. I'm really conscious of time, and I just wanted to hear, key to this is coalition building as well, and that's not something that necessarily the journalists would be doing unless you're BBC Media Action, for example, right? But Deepak, I know that you were in the Civil Society Forum yesterday. As a journalist, how do you work with civil society and advocacy groups whilst maintaining your impartiality?
Yeah, so it's a very difficult thing to, a journalist in public forum, we say that we are impartial, but from within all of us have some lineage, that's a fact. Let's not hide it, that's the truth. So when it comes to, writing about road safety, I think yesterday WHO DG and our, Dr. Ethan Krug also rightly said that this is one subject which is beyond politics, which is beyond your own understanding. Actually, it's a subject that, touches every heart. We can rally around that subject. So when we write about road safety, at least in that subject, we are completely objective. It's a subject which makes us objective. That's point number one. When we talk to civil society in our country, maybe in other developing countries, there is a problem with people like me. Let's accept it. As a journalist, that day I said the same thing. The bureaucrats, the government. There's a problem that we feel that we understand everything under the sky and sun. So till the time you don't accept that you don't know something, then only you get something. Then you'll be, attracting something. So that's a big problem. So when it comes to a journalist, most of us, we feel that, I know everything about road safety, what the civil society will say. Are you going to tell me something? Most of the times journalists ask them for a quick response, and which we want to be, that will suit to our stories. And that's a very unfair thing. So what I try to do, or we try to do in India, most of the journalists, it cannot be generalized. Now, many NGOs have been doing, or civil society organizations, non-profit entities, they've been doing good work. And unlike other countries, it's a big country. So maybe you will find some alliance NGOs work getting highlighted in Delhi, someone else getting highlighted in Jaipur, that's another city of a state, capital of a state. But when it comes to national level reporting, primarily we try to take when there is a proper study, proper investigation, then we try to take the inputs. But civil society organizations have a great role to play in this entire work, primarily because yesterday I think the Chief of Staff of Moldova PM, he made a very interesting point. He said that in government people are lethargic, but people in the civil society, they're much more, they have huge energy. They can push you to a different level. So because they are committed, the commitment might not be on the other side of the story, but that's primarily because I take it as a profession. A bureaucrat take it as a profession, but that non-government entity takes it as a mission. So I think it's high time as a journalist, we all of us across the world, the bureaucrats, policymakers, let's take them. And my personal suggestion to everyone, anyone who makes policy, opinion maker like us, bureaucrats, politicians, please become a pedestrian, please become a cyclist, please drive in a bus, please board a bus. Until you take them, you cannot take a decision. Unfortunately, in this entire world, there is a saying, people make decision for the mode of transport that themselves use. You understand the pain, do the decisions. Until you do that, I think much change will not happen. That's my personal view.
All right. Wonderful. I think we should open it up to a couple of questions, given time. And I see first hand has run up there. Let's go over to this gentleman here. Oh, here's one. Yeah, please answer. I'll take the mic over. Yeah. Oh, you have a mic. You can use the mic.
Hi. Good afternoon. My name is Pedro Amin Gouveia. I'm from Polis. We're the leading network of European citizen regions working on transport innovation. A question to the whole panel. I mean, if we're talking about narratives for road safety, as you know, over the past century, the automotive industry has invested hundreds of billions of dollars in car advertising. specifically advertising cars as a symbol of freedom, of status, of virility, all of these being translated into speed and mass, large cars now, as we see now with the SUVs. Now, this huge sustained investment over a century has shaped culture, attitudes, expectations about how transport should be, what we should wish about transport, and it sustains and encourages dangerous behavior. And it now undermines the much smaller public investment in road safety and sustainable mobility policies. Now, we've seen in public health sector that this was also what happened for many decades with advertising of alcohol, advertising of tobacco. And I'm wondering if you see there that the time may have come for us to do the same with dangerous advertising or advertising of dangerous uses of motor vehicles.
Well, that was open to the panel, so would anyone like to?
Yeah, maybe I can respond.
Would you have anything? Oh,
Yeah.
please.
Yes. Thank you for your important question. Indeed, road safety is a hard issue, and even on the basis of statistics of WHO, we know, the cause of death that exceed, some of the, let's say, health or fatalities. That's why it is exciting, the communication field. It's so exciting. It's a field which allows us to borrow all, materials, all concepts in, and gather them in one well-structured way, well-structured strategy. And as you have said, alcohol, tobacco are hard issues, but road safety in terms of the notion of the risk. The notion of the risk is different from different countries. That's why we have to work hard. It's not, one decision that I can take in my desk, in my office, and I will say, I will reduce such rates by and by. We should work hard, hand in hand with civil society, as you have said, and from our experience in Morocco, we have more than 150 NGOs dealing just with road safety. And I was so pleased in the 17th when we have work, and I told, Mrs. Lottie Brandon, the executive director of the Global Alliance, we have joined such, events. We should create the events. We should create the noise. We should, appear our voice, and we can follow you. That's why, in terms of ideas in communication, we are seeking for good ideas. And the time there is this political willing to deal with this hard issue, I think a strategy should, we should be complementary between public institutions and also NGOs. That's why it is a political, decision that we have to make. In Morocco, we are considering road safety as a national priority. And I refer to such a prize of the King Mohammed VI International Prize, which will incite all NGOs, because the prize remains symbolic, but behind it there is this idea to encourage, to follow, to say that we follow you, we follow NGOs, we follow youth. And this is a hard issue that we have to work all together. Thank you.
Thanks, that was great. Is there any more?
Yeah, I think if that's the cultural shock that people need to feel guilty, as Albert mentioned, maybe it's a way, but I think we should tread very carefully on this road, because people have a choice to drink water instead of alcohol, or to quit smoking. I think it's quite short-sighted to believe that people have a choice not to use cars everywhere. It's not true. I live in Paris. I don't have a car. It's so easy for me to not have a car, because I have the subway, I have a bicycle, and I live 3 kilometers away from work. I'm a very privileged person. But including in France, we've developed, for instance, a shared mobility program, to reduce car usage, because we know very well that cars are used 10% of the time, 10% of the time. 90% of the time they're parked in a garage or using public space in cities. So it's not a positive contribution. It's not the one we want to be using. But most people do not have the choice. I agree with you on the virility, status, ego trip. There is something in those lines happening. But I don't think people choose to be stuck in traffic jam every day, every morning to go to work. I don't think it's something they get a lot of pleasure from. And I don't think they choose to have big vehicles, most of them, because they have a family and they need it. So I think there's some nuance to be brought. I'm sure you have it, but I think comparing vehicles to alcohol and drugs, vehicles can still be in some parts of the world, and including in France, a way to access employment and access schools. That's, for instance, we launched a program to grant access to a vehicle for the most vulnerables with microcredit. We are drowning under requests because in Pôle emploi in France, 1 job offer out of 2 is turned down because people do not have public transport to get to an employment. So there's something about a societal impact that should be taken into account, just to bring a bit of nuance into the debate.
Can you hear me? Yes. Thank you, Claire. That was really valuable. I think we've got another question here. Lady here.
Yeah. Am I audible? Yeah. So, hi everyone. This is Rajni from India. I just want to tell my colleague from there have already asked something for the advertising guidelines. So I am happy to share that in India we have advocated for this. Earlier we could see some advertisements, riders are they are just riding without helmets, and advertisings are happening. So we have approached the concerned stakeholders like advertising standards councils in India. And my NGO colleagues from India have also advocated this issue with concerned authorities. And now we have standards properly in place, and we can see the helmets are on in the advertisements and seat belts are also on. So this is what we have achieved, and thanks to the stakeholders who have listened to us. I just want to, addition of that, I just have one question that, what do you believe that in case of a road safety ambassadors, like we are choosing the celebrities or something like that. So there must be some guidelines for them also, or we can have any actors or TV actress or Bollywood actress or Hollywood actress, like what should be the guidelines for them also as to become a road safety ambassadors?
So one good thing that you talked about, the helmet used in advertisement has been made. It's as Rajani ji said rightly, it's voluntarily industry is doing. So as of now there is no mandatory. It's not mandate that if you violate you'll be penalized. I think we need to go a step forward. That if people don't comply, they must be penalized. And about the celebrities, see that's I think in road safety also everyone talks about it. A good driver, a father who is a good driver can only teach the son how to become a good driver. So, if the celebrity who is talking about how to behave safely on road, if he doesn't behave properly, you see his photograph violating all traffic rules, then it doesn't go well. But then I think one of the point is, for road safety ambassador, you cannot have a regulatory mechanism, because it's primarily based on the understanding between that person and the person who, or the entity, like you have NARSA in our country, it is road transport highways, or maybe a automobile company. They might promote someone as an ambassador. I think it must come from within. I think that's the problem with entire road safety issue. It cannot be imposed on peoples. It must come from within. Until we do that, that is not achieved. I think it will be difficult to achieve 50% goal of a reduction. That's my personal views.
Matt, I know we're running out of time, but I think I just want to say something because I think probably say something that's a bit unexpected coming from where I am. I think that this highlights some of the complexities of the topic, and I think I go back to the point that I said before, which is what we tell people, what we communicate people, what we try to stimulate people to do in the ways that we do that isn't always the same as what we want. And I think that the speed one is a very interesting one, right? I mean, somebody said to me, you can remove, make road safety go away by not having people be mobile, right? And as I say, in road safety, it's not the same as a disease. There's no vaccine, right? We're trying to manage how we move people and how we enable people to move to do their daily life functions. And that's very different. It's about managing a process so that we don't have the negative unintended outcomes versus trying to say we're going to eradicate a disease. That's one thing. And when the speed thing is very, very complicated, and I know that most people would think that I should say we need to limit speeds. But the reality of the truth is that most people want speed not because they enjoy it. Yes, there are those extreme cases of people riding motorcycles and these highway commercials ads, but most people, including me, you I imagine as well, want to get from one place to another in the shortest time possible. And in Paris, absolutely, and in Geneva, it is by taking the bus for me. So I do that because it's faster for me. I don't get into the car because, quite frankly, it takes me 45 minutes to go somewhere in Geneva because the traffic is so bad, right? So I think we have to be honest as well. Speed is not necessarily, the desire for speed isn't because we're all trying to be, these Wild West things, or images. That may be some of it. But the inherent desire for speed is because our society pushes us to do so much. We're being told we have to get to work on time by this hour, and if we're late, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think to say that, I think it's a much more complex issue, and we have to start to think about how we live, right? And that's the whole point of looking at a big perspective and saying, why do we want 15-minute cities? We want 15-minute cities because we want to avoid the need for people to have to travel so far. And actually what happens in a 15-minute cities is that you are unlikely to need to drive fast because you're not commuting that far. So all that to say is that I think we shouldn't just focus on one thing and say, well, we need to get rid of speed. Because inherently, I think everybody values speed as well because we want to do things faster. We want to have everything needs to be done yesterday, everything we want things. And so it's also a cultural shift in terms of how we live. And if you think about it from a perspective of transport, it really is about saying, how do we redesign our lives and our communities in ways that don't necessitate people or don't compel people. Because you're absolutely right. I'm not disagreeing that the advertising could be, for young people and so forth. But again, it's about, do you have the options to do something? Because we all are rushed, and there are times when I'm on a taxi and I say, oh my God, I wish the taxi driver would just go a bit faster because I'm late for my meeting or I have to get to the airport, etc. But why do I have to do that, right? That's the fundamental question that I think we also have to think about. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying do it, but we have to also keep the bigger picture in mind and what drives us as a society to be so obsessed with getting there faster or doing things faster. I think that's the important part of what I want to bring to the conversation.
All right, I think we've got a comment from the front here from... Would you introduce yourself, sir?
Yeah. Thanks, Matt. It's not a question, but hearing all the panelists and their qualities of intervention, I can say that it's not easy to calculate the impact of communication. But should we stop? No. Like said Mr. Ma'afa, we continue to invest in journalists, also in NGO, also on such celebrity. We have here near me such champions and also Paralympic Olympics, but we continue to invest in such celebrity to have more impact in the communication of in road safety. I remember when I meet Nantran and his great job preparing 2020 Stockholm. It's not easy, but he succeeded to have such a conference. And since I met him, I said, why not have such conference in Morocco? And we succeed. So thank you, Nan, for helping us in preparing this conference. And also I want to thank Tyler and Steph, because as you know, it's not easy to prepare only parallelization. It took us more than 3 months, and such meeting each week. Yeah, Steph. So thank you guys for making this session happen, and also the quality of panelists we have here. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to push it a little bit and just give one more question to this gentleman here, if that's all right. Yeah.
Can you hear me? Test. Okay, testing. Sorry. Good afternoon. My name is John from Namibia. I think let me just start by acknowledging what a wonderful and insightful panel this is. Thank you so much. I think they deserve a round of applause. Yeah. I've got a question, but before I get to it, I just want to say in Namibia, definitely road safety branding is an issue. I think before I joined the sector, which is just about 8 months ago, I literally knew nothing about road safety. But other campaigns are so strong and profound, in your face, they haunt you when you go home, and you are compelled to be a responsible citizen and do something about it. So I'm not sure at the global stage, but definitely at the regional level, we have a branding issue, and road safety is not as dire branded as it should be. So my question, I'm responsible for accident and road injury prevention for a state-owned motor vehicle accident fund that essentially takes care of victims of road injuries. And my question is, a lot of the time when I have to motivate, because we support road safety in 2 ways. One way is we work with law enforcement, meaning we fund them to have more aggressive campaigns than what they would otherwise do by themselves. The other option is obviously PR campaigns. Now, I always find it very difficult to win the argument of putting money towards PR as opposed to boots on the ground, because the conventional wisdom and what most lawmakers as well as the bosses are used to is boots on the ground, visibility increases how drivers behave, but it's short-lived. Now, given how difficult it is to prove the effectiveness of a PR campaign and the social complexities associated with that in terms of measurement, what advice does anyone on the panel have in terms of really shifting that change from supporting boots on the ground to moving campaigns? Thank you.
Great question. Who's yes, Deepak.
Yes, as I have said, this issue needs, more than 1.5 hours, because we are dealing with concepts, we are dealing with philosophy, we are dealing with psychology, sociology, also statistics data. So communication, as I have said, is a very large and broad field, and we need to innovate. And this kind of meetings, we are exchanging, ideas. And we cannot say that we have one perfect idea. Lots of ideas, lots of concepts, but we have to innovate, taking into consideration what I have just said, social and cultural, differences on the notion of risks. Thank you very much.
My personal view is, it has to be both, primarily because road safety is not just about campaigns. It has to be also shown on the road. Yeah. So as your bosses might be saying that we must put more money on the ground, but at the same time, see, you can only get evidence of how it works for campaign only when you put money on the ground. So that's number one. Number two, campaign, to my understanding, has to be very different than what we do. The rudimentary way of campaign, like don't drink and drive, don't wear a seat belt, if you hear it for 2-3 minutes or 2-3 times, then you stop listening to it. But as as people in the government or non-government entities who will do the campaign, I will suggest you that you look at the commercial campaigns of the same product. Every time the taste has not changed, like the biscuit of Britannia, the same biscuit, it has not changed, but you see the advertisement every time, primarily because it is put in a manner that makes you more interesting. I think that's the art of Now advertisement, art of writing, we write the same theme, but every time we write it in a manner, you think it's very, very interesting or something new. Then only people will, get. Otherwise, a campaign is very easy way of spending money. Don't take it otherwise. That's a very easy way of spending money. I think you should use money on ground to show the impact, and that impact should become your campaign. So that can, build in getting better results.
Yeah, thank
Okay,
you.
last comment to this gentleman at the front who has a special, please introduce yourself, sir, because your testimony is very relevant.
So, hello everybody. So, I'm Ayman Al-Haddawi, a Paralympic champion. So, 10 years ago, I've been like normal people. I went to play soccer with my friend in outside. So, someone was reckless. He crashed me during the game. So, it was open stadium. It's not a route to drive. So, he crashed me, and like that day. Last day I remember like my left hand, so that's affected me, and he ran away. So I have never known who he is. So my idea, we are in the technology generation. So we know everybody have the application that show where is the cops. They can drive fast or whenever they want. So my idea is, what if we develop an application that make people put their data? If they went reckless driving, they send report to the cops route. So that maybe that help the world a lot.
Thank you. That's a wonderful suggestion, and I'm sure we'll all take that. Plenty more conversations to be had. I saw many hands raised, but I'm conscious we're over time, and we're very lucky to have some final words from the Deputy Executive Secretary of UNECE, which is of course the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, which hosts the UN Special Envoy of the UN Secretary General Special Envoy's office, and of course the UN Road Safety Fund. So let's say a warm, huge thank you to our panel for their wonderful insights. Let's give them a round of applause. And okay, you can feel free to stand up, and Mr. Mariassin, Dimitri Mariassin, thank you so much for joining us, sir. Thank you so much, Dimitri Mariassin.
Wow, this is a very hard session to come and close. First of all, I believe this is probably the best session I've been to so far at this conference, and I really, really appreciate the frankness, the multitude of perspectives, and the discussion that shows that we actually have a real problem, because we are in this bubble, in this conference, absolutely convinced that we have a strong cause, that we know what we're talking about, we know this is one of the most important issues that is solvable and that is not being solved. But listening to the distinguished panelists, I realize that we have a really uphill battle to actually make everyone else aware. Since I started speaking, one person died on the road. And this is just reality. Every 24 seconds, somebody dies on the road somewhere. And this is something that simply doesn't crawl into our conscience. It simply does not become part of our reality unless somebody close to us dies or gets injured. In the space we're in the information space we're in, road safety is not just competing with, let's say, climate change or sustainability more broadly, or human rights or gender narratives that we as the concerned citizens are advocating for. Frankly speaking, it's not competing at all with anything, because our information space is filled with news, horrible news of people killing each other every day, politicians, again, making promises they haven't kept and not agreeing with each other, and lots of junk, okay? This is probably 80, 90% of information space we're in. And the most successful of the campaigns we as concerned citizens, we as the UN, we as the NGO community are able to get to the information space will still only compete for maybe 5% of people's attention, not more. And road safety is not yet on top of it, as we heard from the panel. Now, how to address it? We heard the dilemmas we're facing. Are we going to be focusing on the economic argument, the famous 3 to 5% of GDP? Are we going to actually make people with money concerned about it, or people who are doling out budgets? Or is this actually a human rights issue? More and more, I'm convinced road safety is a right to life issue and should probably be gaining as much attention as other human rights violations. It's just that the human rights mechanisms we have are not really set up for the kind of human rights cases that road safety typically is about. Is it about a problem that is only prevalent in the south or also in the north? Is it true that the north has figured it out and the developing countries need to catch up? Is it true that advanced things, so-called advanced things like helmets, which you heard John Todt speak so passionately about, are only for the advanced economies? I mean, of course, the standards compliant with UN regulation. Well, this is the dilemma we're facing. Is road safety expensive? This is the question we need to be answering. But of course, in all this, one of the key dilemmas we face is this something that we want to talk about as a tragedy? Do we want to emphasize the urgency of it? Do we want to remember every face of every child who died because his or her parents were reckless enough not to fasten a safety belt or put him or her on the back of a motorcycle without a helmet? So is it about remembering the child's face that will never be wiped away from your memory? Or is it, and I agree with that as well, about the future, the narrative about what's possible, the narrative of positive stories that are out there? We see city after city in emerging economies redefining streets. We see bike lanes reclaim territory from cars. We see pedestrians being more respected. But of course, good news is rarely news for the broadcasters. So on the one hand, what we really need to focus about are the positive stories. And I have in my talking points many good examples. I won't go into the details now. But on the other hand, I think it's clear positive stories become too boring very quickly. And while we need to celebrate them, we probably need to remember that, that behind every good story, and I have here Bogota, ciclovias buzzing with cyclists, Oslo's car-free zones. We have real progress in Tunisia with child restraints, and recent progress in Rwanda with helmets according to UN regulations. Behind each story like this, there is another one. There is always a flip side. There is also always in every country, developed countries included, recklessness, corruption, and lack of responsibility that also undermines the effects of our work. So I leave you with the thought that we need to double down on the communication front. We need to live what we say, so every one of us can maybe change our behaviors as well. And we need to really, really be creative. And I think this panel today illustrated what can be done. And once again, let me use this opportunity to thank all of you for being here, to thank WHO and the Special Envoy's Office for their leadership, and to thank the government of Morocco for hosting this very, very important conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marias. This is a conversation that could go on for years, but we're out of time. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being part of it, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Many more stories to be told. Thank you.
Merci.